Hello and welcome to the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anybody that wants to start, grow, or maintain an existing solo or small group performing career. I've got over 50 years of live performance experience, and will share not only my tips, but the tips of other hardworking pros in their neck of the woods to help you make more money, help you become more successful, book more work, and generally enjoy the process. Let's get underway. Guitar Made Simpler, an intelligent approach, is the first all-new guitar method in years. Riley Wilson, veteran guitar teacher, writer, and performer, has taught this same material successfully to thousands of students since 1987. This logical approach will help anyone begin mastering the world's most popular instrument. A combination of formal notation with guitar tablature and included MP3 disc guarantee your success. Online video by the author demonstrating performing examples slowly and correctly. Start making real progress on the guitar. Order your copy today at guitarmadesimpler.com. Today I have a guest I have wanted to talk to for eons, and what's interesting is that he doesn't live but maybe an hour or so away from me. Welcome, please, Chad Vermillion.
Hey, Riley. Thanks so much for having me, brother.
So this is a lot of fun, and let me explain the backstory because most folks that aren't in the Metroplex wouldn't have heard of us, but we are both performers, and you're on the Fort Worth side of things. I'm in Frisco, north of Dallas, and we both play solo shows, and we've been doing that for many, many years. Chad is one of the best guitar players, particularly classical guitar, not just in Metroplex, but the entire Southwest U.S. And we'll get into how he got that good and all of those kinds of things. But before we go any further, again, as I said, I appreciate you being on here. Let's begin at the beginning. Why the guitar? What got you into that?
Short answer, my mother. This is one of the things I'm most grateful for about my life. My mother made each of me and my four siblings learn an instrument. She said, "You are going to learn to play something. You're going to take for a year, and you have no choice in that. So you can pick." And even then, I didn't want to. So she said, "You're going to play the guitar, and you're going to play the classical guitar." She loved the classical guitar, and
Wow.
she'd heard some Segovia stuff and Mason Williams back in the day. And so she forced me to take lessons, and just like any petulant child, I dug my heels in. I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to play baseball. And but she was very wise. She found me a teacher who was incredibly wise. He realized he was not going to get me to practice unless I was inspired. So he took me to see my absolute favorite guitar player of all time, Pepe Romero.
Wow.
And
That's your first
the
show?
That was my first show I
Wow.
ever saw. He came to Ed Landreth Auditorium, TC. I can still remember every detail of that concert. And he played a couple of songs, one of which I listened to, and I was spellbound. And I said, "Enough. You don't have to tell me to practice. I'm going to learn to play that song. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to play that song." So I would, instead of going out and being mischievous as a kid, I was playing guitar. I was practicing 3, 4 hours a day, trying to get my tremolo pattern right, trying to get nail patterns right, trying to do fan strumming right. And so anyway, long story short, learned to play that song. And many years later, when I was in the Navy about to be deployed into Iraq, I had always wanted to record an album. And but I'd never had the time or the drive to do that. But I had 3 weeks of downtime to do absolutely nothing. I had my guitar, had songs to know how to play, and I had an old computer. So in a Marine Corps barracks in Dam Night, Virginia, I recorded an album of my favorite classical pieces. And the guy that mastered that for me said, "Hey, there's this new online music thing coming out, like for streaming. Do you want to be part of that?" And I said, "Well, does it make me any money?" And they said, "Well, it's more about exposure, but eventually might lead to money." And that was the best decision I ever made, to say yes to that, because within a year, two of my tracks got picked up by the International Classical Guitar Playlist, where it was Spotify and Pandora. And
Wow.
so now I have songs in playlists along with Pepe Romero, John Williams, the Romero brother, and so I'm very grateful. So I get a nice royalty check for that every month now. But
That
that's my
is
story.
tremendous.
I've been playing now, golly, since I was 8 years old. I am 46 years old now, so 30 whatever years that is. I've been performing as a professional Since I was about 18, I want to say I actually did some concert series at parts, but right now I just do what Riley, and it's so good to talk with you, brother, because you and I have been doing the same thing now for it must be going on 2 decades in the same area. I mean, I know I've been
Yeah.
on the Bash, formerly Gig Masters, for for ages and ages and ages, and I've never and I see all the stuff that he does, and and I'm like, and I'm not nearly the musician that this guy is. This guy's a
Well,
musician.
let me pause you for just a moment because for those of us that those of folks that are watching this that are maybe a singer or a piano player or do some other instrument, when it comes to guitar, there are two disciplines that I think most guitar players worldwide would agree are incredibly difficult. If you're more of a pop guitar player, a blues or rock player, you eventually end up in jazz. That's the story of my teacher, Scott Henderson, when I was at GIT. That's the story of so many people, Mike Stern, who worked with, Miles Davis and everybody else. The other end of the spectrum is classical guitar. And classical guitar is, in my opinion, because I've studied both, I studied both when I was at GIT, I've played it ever since, is incredibly difficult. If you don't believe me, ask Andy Summers, who studied it for 4 years at Cal State Northridge in the mid 70s before he ever joined the police. And there's a lot of police tunes. He's playing classical guitar riffs on a Telecaster. If you think classical guitar is hard, play a classical guitar piece on an electric guitar. I mean, we're talking incredibly, incredibly difficult things to do. And I want to
Yeah,
talk about, you mentioned having a teacher that exposed you. And I'm going to go back to my uh, podcast with my old student and buddy, David Fortune from South Texas. Take notes on this. This is great stuff. For you parents that have children that want to expose them to a great musical lifestyle, take them to a concert by somebody that they're studying the instrument for, if possible. Would you agree?
oh my God, I've got a story about that. I'll let you finish, but I got to
No,
talk
no.
about that.
I just want you to talk about that because I think seeing somebody, again, for those folks that aren't into classical guitar, Pepe, Pepe Romero, my Spanish is bad this morning,
Yeah,
is and has been a world-class player. That would be like seeing Wes Montgomery in the 1960s
yeah,
or maybe Steve Howe of Yes in the 1970s, right? Those are world-class, A-game, top of the list players, right? And you got
yeah.
that opportunity. How long had you been playing guitar when you went to this concert?
That'd have been probably about 6 months, 6 to 9 months, just picking and like not wanting to do it. And he was smart. He said he needs to be inspired. He didn't know if I was gonna be inspired, but he took me, took a chance, and now I love classical music because of that. I love flamenco music because of that. I love classic rock. I love jazz. I love metal. I love hard rock. But classical music is my that grounds me. That's where I come in. Vivaldi and Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, and all that. I love the intricacy of classical music, which, by the way, you did mention that a lot of players will either go the classical route or they'll go the jazz route. There's players like Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads from Ozzy, he spent hours playing classical guitar because his plan was to leave rock and roll and be a classical guitar player. And so for
Absolutely
me,
true.
right. And so for me, it came full circle in my life because I have 4 children, two sons, 2 daughters, and my second born has always been a little challenging to parent. And he got in big trouble this last October, a year ago. It's been a year. And he was grounded for 2 weeks. He could not have his phone. He couldn't do anything. And I've been trying to get him to play guitar for years. I said, "I'll teach you." I'll be like, "No, I don't want to do that. I'll play the drums and whatever." Well, he was bored, and a friend of his, because now at this point he doesn't know what music he likes. He's listening to hip hop and this and that. Well, his buddy sent him Enter Sandman by Metallica to listen to, and this little 14-year-old brain, he's grounded. He hears Metallica and he's like, "Whoa, that's what a guitar sounds like." And so then he listens to some Metallica and then from there to Megadeth and Anthrax and all that. And so now it turns out he loves metal music. Well, I didn't know this. He asked me, he said, "Dad, can I borrow your Telecaster?" Well, and I'm like, well, first of all, I was shocked. I was like, "You know what a Telecaster is?" And it's like, "Yeah, mommy, you want me to hook it up?" I'm doing it. Like, "No, no, just go away. Leave me alone." Uh, all right. Well, that was in October. And I hear him just playing, but I don't really can't really hear him. He has headphones on. I know he's learning. And in April, he asked me, he says, Dad, can we go to Guitar Center? And of course, as a father, I was like, we have arrived. As a musician father, we get there. And I watched my son. I wish I could show you the video now. I'll send it to you. But he sits down and picks up a Les Paul and starts playing Tornado of Souls by Megadeth and just shredding like I have never something I'll never accomplish in my lifetime. My son now is one of the most accomplished metal guitar players I've learned. And that came also for me taking him that now granted he'd already heard Metallica, but then a month after that I took him to see Disturbed. And so he knows every metal. That's his thing. Now, it's not my thing. I'm not really a metalhead. I love classic rock. I love rock and roll. I love hard rock. But I can appreciate metal. And what I can really appreciate metal, it's the closest thing to classical music when it comes to an art form. Metal is very, very, very closely related to classical music, especially thrash metal and the way they do their solos and how melodic they can be. So anyway, that for me it means everything. My son plays music. Now it may not be the kind of music that I want to play, but we can play together because now we can appreciate the same kind of music.
That's a tremendous story. And it's funny, I had a similar experience. My youngest son, when he was about 13, came to me and says, quote, Dad, can you teach me some guitar solos? I've been teaching, as everybody knows, I've been teaching since 1985, and
Yeah.
that's what we do. I teach and, record voiceovers and play gigs. And I said, well, son, I've got this brand new book called Guitar Made Simpler. I said, it's great. And he says, no, 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 Dad, I just want to learn some guitar solos. About a week later, he said, Dad, how do you play Born to Be Wild? And I said,
Oh,
Trent, that's not an easy song. I said, son, there's a power chord, and you've got to shift the pinky and all that. I showed him, and in 15 minutes, he's playing it note perfect.
so
No
he's one of those
lessons.
too.
He
Yeah, yeah.
just he just did that, right? About 7 months later, he ends up. We have a middle school across the street from us in Frisco. He has a little band, and they're playing 1985 by Bowling for Soup. He plays me the solo on Wednesday night, I think it was, and he's playing it on one string. And I said, son, no, no, no. I said, go across the strings. I said, you don't have to move, just do this. I watched this performance at school the next night, and there's probably 30 girls by the stage screaming at these middle schoolers. And he plays the solo where I showed him. And it's just like, so I think there's a lot of that. Trevor Lukather, Steve Lukather's son, is an incredible guitar
Yeah, yeah.
player.
Yeah.
Those folks that haven't heard about Wolfgang Van Halen, watch
Wolfie,
Rick
Wolfie.
Beato interview with him.
Oh,
It's
it's
unbelievable,
great.
right?
Oh,
So
he's
I think there's something to being exposed to music early on. Would you agree?
oh, without a doubt. Early, and you said it early on. I mean, if you can expose your children to music that resonates with them, when they're 6 and 7 and 8 years old, then they may be inspired to pick up an instrument and play. But, just expose them to that and let them, and definitely encourage whatever musical abilities you see in
Yeah.
your children. And even if they want to play drums, put some
Well,
pillows in your ears and enjoy
here's the
yourself. So
hilarious part of this story, and I'm actually glad you asked that because this is almost like we're teeing it up for one another. So I actually took a picture. I helped Trent get a nicer guitar. He had like his 14th birthday. He told all his friends, just come over to my house and bring money. So
yeah,
I shopped and found him an Epiphone Les Paul Sunburst, which he played for a while. And then he comes to me
yeah.
about 6 months later and says, Dad, I want to sell the guitar and get a drum set. And I said, Trent, you're killing me. He said, and you know how
Oh,
your kids can always put the knife in and twist it at just the angle to get the right amount of hurt. He said, Dad, I only took up the guitar because you wouldn't let me play drums.
well, I guess
So we
technically,
end
well,
up,
that's Edward Van Halen.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So he ends up selling that guitar, bought a Ludwig kit that he would put in his bedroom upstairs is above the garage. And he couldn't play lightly with the kick drum. In fact, he played like Keith Moon. He's a good drummer, but he just
Mm,
bashes stuff.
heavy, heavy. But
Anyway, so we dealt with about 2 years of that. finally, thankfully, one of the kids at church bought his acoustic kit. His parents never spoke to us after that, but he
Ah,
got a Roland electronic kit, and we actually
yeah,
recorded a couple of songs. My oldest son plays bass, so we recorded the Journey tombstone and Love the Three of Us, which was a lot of fun. And I think
that's
anytime
cool.
you could do that in a family environment, that's great. I want to go back to this first guitar teacher. How long were you with him?
I was with him from the time I was, well, okay, I had a guitar teacher for like 4 months and he wasn't, and I didn't vibe with him at all. So mom was like, no. Then about 2 months later is when I got with this teacher. And I was with him from the time I was 9 all the way until I was 16. And I learned from this guitar teacher, I learned music theory. I learned how to read music, number one. So I really do want kids to learn how to read music. I learned how to do chords. I learned circle of fifths. I learned jazz theory. I learned, classical flamenco scales. I learned modality. But this teacher really didn't take me to virtuosity levels, so to speak. He
Right.
got me, very good. And then I found another teacher who was a Bolivian, and he had been playing. I think he had been playing, I think, with the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra for a while,
Wow.
and he'd also played. I want to say with Tulsa, not Tulsa, in Florida, somewhere in Florida, Tampa Symphony Orchestra. So he's very accomplished. But what I really appreciate about this teacher, he could teach me how to be a virtuoso. I mean, he taught me that, the way to hold your hands, the way to do the rest stroke properly, the way to do the tremolo where every note is individual. He taught me to appreciate folk music, Latin America folk music, Bolivian, Brazilian, Argentinian, and those rhythms, a really good love for that, and how to get those rhythms out of the guitar, without having to have a drum. So I've had two really, really great teachers in my life. One of them I was with, my entire childhood. The other one I was with for 5 or 6 years as a young adult. And but I have had tremendous love playing live. Just like you, I love going out. And my favorite gig in the world, I actually did 2 weeks ago. This is my all-time favorite gig of all time. This is a 3-hour gig for a 92nd birthday party. This young lady was 92 years old, and another guy was there. The friend of the guy who booked me, he was turning 93. There
Wow.
were probably 70 to 80 people at this event, all of them, and they was the best crowd I ever had. They all asked for the old songs that I love that I got from my grandparents. And they got up and danced, and they gave me a standing ovation for every song, and they wanted to sing. They got another guitar out and started playing with me, and
Wow.
it was I love the older generation so much because they appreciate those things in life, those really fine things in life.
It is marvelous to play for any audience that appreciates you. Of course, we both played gigs where whatever you play is met with a thunderous burst of indifference, right? So when you have an opportunity to play for somebody that
Yeah.
really appreciates it, it's wonderful. Now, I got to ask you a question because mom exposing you to classical guitar. Did you get pushback by the time you're a junior, senior? Like, what are you going to do with your life or anything at all like that? Or had you planned to be a professional musician? Because how did all of that transpire?
Oh well, it's funny you say that. No, because I never planned to be a professional guitar player. Matter of fact, I had almost planned to be a professional opera singer and
Wow.
theater singer. As a matter of fact, I had a full scholarship to UNT for vocal theater performance and opera.
Can I pause it for
And
just a moment? For those
yeah,
people that do not know, if you ever read Guitar Player magazine in the 70s or 80s, people that would talk about North Texas State, that's what we now call UNT or University of North Texas, one of the greatest musical schools in the
yeah,
world, period,
yeah,
end of discussion. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I'm glad you know that. Not many people do know that, but North Texas is a tremendous music school. And a friend of mine believed in me a lot in the quality of my voice. So anyway, I auditioned and got a scholarship, full star ride scholarship. At the same time, I was looking at a young lady I was thinking of marrying. And I realized that opera and theater doesn't pay, really great unless you're really, really great at it and live in New York or LA or wherever it is. Yeah, so it's just like I instead went and got computer software engineering, and I did that for 17 years. And but I played music on the side. I was in the military as well, and I kept playing the whole time. And I have been playing gigs pretty much the entire time since I was 18 years old until now.
Fantastic.
And I love that. I never wanted to be a concert. Well, there are some things I do want to do. I want to play with a few symphony orchestras. I would love to play some certain songs, concertos. I would love to, I wouldn't necessarily want to be like a concert musician, to do that as a living for the sake, because I love what I do and I don't want to hate what I do, so to speak. And
More take notes. What he just said, you've got to love what you do. If you don't love it, it's not worth doing.
right, because my profession, I'm an actor. That's my true profession right now. I'm an actor. I'm also a fitness coach and I'm a bodybuilder. And but I'm also a guitar player. And it is if I were to do and actually I'm a professional at all of those because I make all my money through all those. If I were to do just one, I would probably end up hating that one thing. And I love the guitar and I love singing. So when I'm gigging, it's not just playing, but it's also singing as well. And I love that. And I want to keep doing that my entire life because I get the most joy out of bringing joy to small groups of people, and backyard barbecues are what I love the best.
Yeah. One of the great things about living in the Metroplex, which we both do, is that you can play all over the state of Texas, really, and find people that love pretty much whatever kind of music you're into. You'll find people that do it. My next door neighbor is in a very successful blues band that plays all over the United States. They do incredibly well, right? If you're interested in classical guitar, as Chad is and has mastered that, there's work for that. So we're very fortunate to live in an area where you can do those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Let's go back to when you started gigging. You said you were about 18 at the time. What were those
Mhm.
first gigs like, and where were you playing, and what kinds of stuff?
Oh my goodness. Let me think back. Let me think back. I remember now, this is back before the bash. This would have been back, man, this would have been 90. 87, 98. I want to say
Mhm.
back in that time
Yeah,
frame.
yeah.
Internet wasn't really a thing. Um, we were just starting to come out. I remember I had business cards. I had I did not have a demo tape yet, but I had business cards. I had some flyers that I would take to local venues, and I would go to like wedding chapels or Chamber of Commerce, things like that. I would do a lot of networking. And my first few gigs would have been gotten through that, or it would have been a referral from my mother's friend of a friend, or something like that. Um, but as soon as I want to say about 2001 or two, I don't remember when the first online booking service came about. I can't. I think I don't remember what it was. I mean, so we had Gig Salad, Gig Masters.
Hmm.
There was another one. It was another one at the time. I can't remember. I got a lot of stuff through them, but as soon as Gig Masters came around, that's pretty much where everything came
Yeah, I
from.
didn't learn about that until 2008, I believe it was. But what's interesting is that that really did change things because interesting you mentioned mid 90s because my wife and I moved here with our family from Raleigh the end of 96, July of 96. And at that time, what we had to do is I simply called up all the booking agents and said, "Hey, this is what I do, da 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 da." And I was very fortunate. I landed a restaurant gig in downtown Frisco that I talked about
Yeah.
on the first podcast at Randy's Steakhouse. Did that for 3 years. But I think your comment about just networking, getting out there and talking to people, letting people know what you do, and then when you actually have the gig, then that's when you have to deliver the goods. But if you do,
I have done a lot of free gigs. I remember in the first, I actually did a lot of free gigs just to get exposure and just to get some pictures of me playing in front of crowds. So I'd ask, the Italian Inn in Fort Worth. I still remember that. I went in there, volunteered to play for them and for free, and they let me do their and I played there again. They brought me back.
well,
They hired
that's
me.
how I got the Randy's gig. I told them, I said, look, I have, in fact, it's funny because we're actually buying our house, signing the papers, and they had to run do something. So I went across the street, and Randy Burks was there with his dad Don, and I told him, "Look, I've been doing this in Raleigh," and I said, "Look, I'll be happy to come in on Friday night and play for an hour. If you like what I want, if you like what I
Hmm.
do, pay me this much for an hour, and then I'll keep any tips I get. If you don't like me, just tell me to go home, and I'll go home, and I won't bug you again." And that turned into a 3 year
Yeah,
show.
yeah. And okay, now this is a great, I would say something to every guy who wants to be a gigging musician. Um, if you are good at what you do and you can offer a service that people enjoy and they want to hear, and you have a venue that you want to get into, then do what Riley did. Go to them and say, I will play for you for free. Now, that's not very popular because it means doing stuff for free, and we don't like doing that. But if you can provide them a service that benefits them and gets them more money because people enjoy hearing you, then they will bring you back and they will pay you for that because money makes money. So if you want to make them money, they're going to make you money.
Absolutely. Let's talk about something else because you dropped so many cool little bombshells that I have to go back and retrieve each of them. You mentioned about being an actor and a singer. Obviously, you're playing classical guitar, and because of the Pepe Romero show, you're inspired enough to
Mhm.
practice. But where did singing come in, and did you do anything else musical growing up?
Oh my gosh, again, my mother, I love to hate my mother. But she made me, I love my mother and I'm grateful to my mother. At the time, I didn't love her so much, but because she made me join choir in high school. And she said, You're going to learn to sing choir because you have a beautiful voice. I'm like, You don't know my voice. I've heard you. And anyway, and I was terrified. I did not want to sing and anybody. I was like, but they picked me to sing the solo for White Christmas in the school choir. And I thought, okay, you know what? I have to get up here so I can either make an idiot of myself and be like a shy idiot, or I can just give it everything I got and try to do it. So my only source of information was Bing Crosby from the movie White Christmas. So I got up there.
One
It
of
was
my
just
all-time favorite holiday
I'm
songs, right there with you.
dreaming of a white. Anyway, so I just started crooning the way that he did, and I got a standing ovation from the audience. And I, I was like, I didn't understand until I heard the video when they played it back for me. I was like, sound pretty good.
Well, that just sounded great what you did right there. And by the way,
Oh,
there are a whole lot worse singers to emulate than a Bing Crosby. Would you
oh
agree?
man, just oh gosh, Bing is he's one of those you hear him, you instantly know who it is. I mean,
Yeah,
that's Bing. He's
yeah.
got his style. So that made me realize I really loved to sing. When I heard my voice actually sounded pleasant and it didn't sound horrible, I then like, okay, I took voice lessons from some people there in high school. I actually learned to sing opera, and
Wow.
I learned how to. So my whole senior, I did a senior recital where I did Broadway, I did theater, I did opera, I did spiritual, sacred, I did operatic. And from that, I got an invitation to audition at North Texas at the time, and they said, pick two songs, a foreign language song, a big power song, come up here and audition for this big scholarship ride they had at the time because they were really pushing musical theater at the time. And I auditioned for that, and I got that. And of course, there were decisions to be made if I wanted to do that at the time, as you know, and it was a good decision. However, at the same time is when I first fell in love with barbershop harmony. I loved singing barbershop. I heard the vocal majority sing out of Dallas.
One of my dear
And
friends has been in the vocal majority for years, and it's one of
what's
my
his
favorite.
name?
Brian Armstrong.
Brian Armstrong. I know, again, I've sang with the vocal majority for 15 years.
Wow.
And
Okay. That explains everything. For those people that don't know, the Vocal Majority, based here in Dallas, is one of the greatest men's singing choirs you will ever hear anywhere in the world, period. End of the sentence.
yeah,
They're simply amazing. So
there's no one
now
better.
that explains volumes about why you've got the voice that you have, because the Vocal Majority are a tremendous. I've seen their shows at the Eisenman with my wife and absolutely love it. And so they're phenomenal. So
Yep.
that explains a lot about your voice, my friend.
And to explain about the vocal majority, you'd have to know about Jim Clancy, the director of the vocal majority,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
recently passed away and had, I want to say, over 2,800 people at his funeral. which
Wow.
speaks about the man that he was.
Yeah.
And what I got from that chorus was a lot of love from that man and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and hours learning harmony and pitch and blend till you want to pull your hair out. But it taught me the love of performing in a collective as
Yeah,
well, not just as a
absolutely.
solo artist.
Sure. Well, one of the great things about being in a choir, and I've suggested this on multiple occasions through the podcast, is that if you think that you might want to sing, even if you think you're terrible, get in a choir, get in a church choir, get in a school choir, get in a community choir, whatever, and learn to do it. Because one of the things that I do, I've got a friend who's Larry Barnett, who is a solo sax player, singer, guitar player here in Dallas, told me probably 10 years ago. He said, hey, put your backing vocals on your tracks. He said, people will sing along with him. Boy, when I did that, what a game changer that was. And normally, when I do my backing tracks in here, I'll put down a lead vocal that gets immediately muted when I'm doing the show. But I'll go in and do the harmonies. And for the most part, I'm able to nab that in one or two takes because I was singing in choir from seventh grade on, still do the
Yes.
church choir at this very moment. And I think that any singing that you do, singing is like a muscle. We'll get to that in the next podcast because
Yeah.
muscle memory is a thing, and training your muscles, whatever they are, for guitar, for singing, for lifting heavy objects, whatever, those sorts of things have incredible, important benefits. So
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. So you mentioned this lady who helped kind of redirect where the ladder was focused.
Yeah, my mother. My ex-wife, I should say. No, we were married for 20 years, but no, at the time, that was that was the right decision for me. I mean, it was going to have to be moved to New York or do something, get on, Broadway somewhere, and that's just not the life I really wanted. I wanted a family, I had other interests, as well.
Sure.
But I will say that, and now I want to hit on something that you said because you mentioned backing tracks. Now, again, coming from a classical guitar background, came from more of a lot as far as a live gigging musician. I kind of came from more of a purist background that says we don't do backing tracks. Everything has to be live. That's what they paid for. Blah 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 blah. And I realized very quickly that that limits you to what you can and can't play as far as what people want to hear. Now, one thing I incorporated, I know you might do this as too, real, Bradley, but I incorporated looping into my live performances. And my trusty looper I've had for 12 years, it looks like it's just finally fried out this morning. I got to it. I got to go get a new one. But now I do realize the importance of, especially if you want to get a crowd into your set and you want to get them vibe. It's not just about how well you can play, but they've got to be able to feel the vibe that you're trying to put out. And backing tracks can be a great way of doing that, especially if you're doing something where you want, like you said, people to sing along
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
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 And that's still, you're still a live musician. Even though you're using a backing track, I thought that was cheating for the longest time. But no, it adds to your performance and it brings out you.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things I mentioned yes earlier, I saw them when they toured back in the early 70s. In fact, the first time I saw them was November 1971 at Duke, and they opened for 10 years after. A year later, when they did the song Close to the Edge, they actually had a reel-to-reel tape that ran all the way through the show for the song Close to the Edge. The birds and the water dribbling and all that stuff you hear at the very beginning of that ran all the way through the song. The Who did the same thing when they did Quadrophenia. In fact, you'll see pictures of Keith Moon wearing those old COS Pro 4AA headsets, those 70s things that we
Big
called
old
our brain
yeah,
crushers. He would
yeah,
actually wear that and play that when they did Baba O'Reilly or when they did Won't Get Fooled Again because they had tracks. And so
yeah.
people have been doing that since the 70s.
Yeah, Pink
It's
Floyd did
not
that all the
really
time.
cheating, and even if the artist himself does that, but I think that that's legit. Having said what I just said, there are times, for example, I will enjoy, particularly on acoustic guitar, I'll just do something like Country Roads and just play that acoustically and sing that, and people love that. And I say, you know what? I'm sick of the tracks for a moment. Let me veer, right? And so one of the great
Yes.
things about that, and I want to ask you about that, what's your favorite part about playing solo shows?
Honestly, for me, if I'm playing solo show, the more feedback I get from the audience makes it good or bad for me. So if I'm playing a solo show, if I'm playing something I'm looping, there's rhythm to it, and it's a dance number. If I see people getting up and dancing to what I'm playing, that's my absolute favorite. If I see people singing a lot, a perfect example, I play Sweet Caroline as one of my,
Yep.
crowd pleasing thing. Getting in and hearing the ba, ba,
Oh, sure.
I love crowd participation more than
Yeah.
anything. Not just about me. I've got some show off pieces. I can get up there and blah, 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 whatever and get people to be like, oh, you're so good. But when they're into it and their energy is coming back at me through their singing or through their dancing, that to me that's the pinnacle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most solo performers agree when you learn, and I think this is an important lesson, and I think some of this comes with maturity. Maybe there's some folks that are 18 years old that already know this, but when you're playing for yourself, that's an audience of one, right?
There
When
you
you play
go.
for other
Yep.
people, all of a sudden it becomes bigger because there's more than one person involved. And music simply is communication. You know, we're communicating from one person to another, like you and I on this podcast this morning. But it's important, I think, to understand that when, particularly if you can, I won't even say enlighten people, but if you can entertain and uplift them. One of my favorite things that I've said for years is that if I'm playing a show and I'm playing an old song and somebody hasn't heard it for a while, their face, it's like they're transported. And you
Yep.
can see they've gone somewhere. Their mind
Yep.
went somewhere, and all of a sudden they're remembering something they haven't experienced in a long
Yep.
time. And it's not just nostalgia, it's actually doing something that I think is valuable for all of us.
Well, I have a question for you, actually. Speaking along that, are there any things like, let's say you're playing a set going okay, but it's just dead. People are not giving you feedback. They're just not into it. Is there anything you'll kind of sneak in there, does kind of a test or feel to see if they're listening?
I have done that from time to time. Yeah, I think probably, and this is one of the toughest things because again, both of us, I've been playing gigs for money since 1972.
Golly.
Richard Nixon was the president at that time. My first gig was a high school quartet, and we made 25 bucks a man, and I thought I would die and won the lottery. You know, it was incredible. But one of the things that I've learned, particularly here in Dallas, because the Dallas market is a pretty vicious one. You have to be really good at what you do. You have to
Yep.
believe in what you do. And even if you feel like you aren't going over, you have to maintain the aura that yes, I am. So that's a great question. And yeah, sometimes I'll change things. You know, I might do an Otmar Lieber song in a gig that people are mostly listening to country or rock, or I'll do a blues tune, or I'll do a smooth jazz song. And so I do like to mix things up, and I think that that's important. Let's get back to this on the second podcast. I'm Riley Wilson, and you've been listening to the Band of One podcast. We're glad you're here. We'll continue with this one on the next episode. In the meanwhile, if you have ideas for an upcoming podcast, or you'd like to be featured, or know somebody that would, reach out to me through our Facebook page, facebook.com/Band of One podcast, or simply get in touch through my webpage, which is guitarmadesimpler.com. See you next time.